Hey guys, Baldwin here. Today we're going to be talking all about speaking tips that will help you to engage your audience so that you can crush every talk and book more paid gigs. You see, being a public speaker is awesome. I know because I've spoken to over 500,000 people at hundreds of conferences and events and other businesses over the last decade. So you get to travel the world, you get to share your message with people, and you get to change lives for the better. If there's one thing that every speaker has in common is that they want to be engaging. Nobody wants to be halfway through their speech only to notice that someone in the front row is taking a nap. It's happened to me before, all right? And I believe it's the worst. So how do you make sure that your talk is as engaging as possible? How do you keep the audience awake, alert, hanging on your every word from the moment that you step on stage? Well, today, my friend, I've got 7 tips for you on how to do just that. So let's jump right in. Tip number 1 is to start strong and avoid fluff. Your speech should start the moment that you walk on stage and open your mouth. Don't stand there for a few seconds like shuffling papers or collecting your thoughts. Don't mumble a few words to ensure that your mic is on. Don't pull out your phone for one last email check while you're waiting for the cue from production. If the audience isn't sure whether or not you started your speech, they might be tuning you out, so let there be no doubt. Skip the small talk, avoid all the mumbling, and make clear that it is on. Now, what exactly should you say when you start? Well, let's start with what you should not say. Now, avoid the housekeeping intros at all costs. None of this like, I just flew in from such and such, or I'm so happy to be here. Like, duh, of course you're happy to be here. You're getting paid to share ideas. We're all assuming that you're happy to be here. And if you're not, we'd rather not hear about it anyway. You want to start your talk strong with an opening line or paragraph that is going to grab the audience's attention from the start. You want to put them on alert immediately that if they're not paying attention, they're going to miss something really, really good. You want to project confidence and command, not necessarily with volume, but with a strong opening that you know really, really well. Now, one question we get is, should you memorize your opening? Yes, you absolutely should. Every part of your talk should be really well rehearsed, but the opening itself should be something that you are very comfortable delivering because you know it so well. Getting off to a strong start sets the tone for an entire talk right from the first word, so it deserves that due diligence so that you nail it every single time. Tip number 2 is that you want to interact with the audience early and often, so that you have the audience's attention with that strong opening that you just delivered, right? So how do you hold it? How do you keep it? A great way to do that is to ask something small of them and to give them a chance to participate and be part of the experience. The simplest way to do that is also the most obvious. Ask the audience a question and request some type of response, whether it's a show of hands, a round of applause, or having them shout out their age or what they ate for breakfast. Getting them involved will create engagement. Remember though, that you have to earn their trust before you ask them to do anything crazy. If you walk on stage, you ask the crowd to get up and dance, you're probably going to be met with some pretty awkward stares and some dirty looks. Now sure, there's going to be one person in the room who takes you up on it because he loves breaking out the running man every chance he gets. But other than that nut job, no one is going to appreciate the invitation. Start small with your requests and build them as you earn trust. Now, one last note on asking an audience questions. Make sure that you are specific about how you interact with them. People may assume that questions are rhetorical if you don't tell them that you want them to respond or how to respond. So use phrases like clap or by show of hands or say yes if so that they know how best to respond to you. Doing this will help you avoid that situation where you ask for a response to a question and nobody really knows exactly what to do. You end up with people who raise their hand, a couple people who shout yes, a few crazy people who clap, and then again the crazy guy who starts doing the running man again because he just likes doing it. It's really awkward. Ask questions, let them know how to respond, and then keep them engaged. Tip number 3 is to speak with intention. If you want an audience to stay engaged through your talk, you've got to pay special attention to your cadence. Your pacing, your timing, the pauses that you use while you deliver your ideas are sometimes just as important as the ideas that you're sharing. While every speaker is different, a common problem that many speakers have is rushing through their talk. Sometimes when you get on stage, we race through our content without even really realizing it. Our adrenaline gets going, we start speaking faster than we normally would, and it's just like off to the races. Or we get really excited about one of our points that's a few sentences away, so we speed up to get there, and we lose half the audience in the process. The truth for almost all of us as speakers is that we should be really, really mindful of our pacing. So how exactly do we do that? First of all, remember to pause. Let your powerful point sit So instead of just racing past them, give them a few seconds to settle in. Like I did right there. See, you see the pause that you put in as a speaker always feels longer to you than it does to the listener. So you want to pause for as long as you think you should, and then almost hold it for twice that time. Then maybe hold it for a second or two longer. Yes, I'm serious. That's how long you should pause, because after you deliver some of those key points, you want them to land with the audience. Now, obviously, you don't want to overuse this tool, or you're going to annoy the audience and probably run out of time with your speech. So don't pause after every word or speaking painfully slow. Just use pauses with intention for points that the audience will need a second to really sit with. So unless you're a William Shatner, I can't even do a William Shatner impression there, you want to use your pauses sparingly. But when you do use them, you want to make them count. So pay attention to your cadence, make sure you're not rushing, use pauses for effect, and remember that nailing the perfect cadence isn't always going to happen. So if you're going to err on the side of slower rather than faster. All right, let's get to tip number 4. You want to avoid text-heavy slides. Now, slides can be a great visual aid in a presentation, and using them to share a powerful photo or to emphasize a key word or phrase can really go a long way in making an impact on your audience. But if you load up slides with charts and definitions and super long bulleted lists, you're going to lose your audience in the slide. You'll be sharing some amazing point that you have, but your audience is just going to be too preoccupied reading the slide to hear what it is that you're actually saying. The KISS method is a great rule of thumb for your slides. Keep it simple, stupid. Now, I don't really think that you're stupid. You really seem lovely and bright. But just remember to keep it simple. So instead of 5 pictures of your trip to Europe, just pick the best one and let that fill the slide. Instead of having like 7 facts about last year's earnings report, pick the 1 or 2 ones that the audience really needs to see the most. You can always fill in the blanks with what it is that you're saying, so you don't need to have everything on your slides. Remember, as a speaker, it's your job to make sure your slides don't distract from your talk. If your audience is reading, they can't be listening. So don't lose their ear by distracting their eyes. Tip number 5 is to turn up the action. When you're on stage, your audience is never going to be as close to you as they would be in a one-on-one conversation. Now, every venue is different, of course, but even in a smaller, intimate setting, presenting to a group of people should always feel a bit bigger than a personal conversation. This is why when you're on stage, you've got to turn everything up, from the way that you move, to the way that you use your voice, even to your facial expressions. In almost every speaking situation that you're in, subtle is not going to cut it. Think about the makeup that a Broadway actor would wear on stage. It's always going to be way more bold than the makeup that they wear in real life. Why? Because it needs to be bigger. The same goes for some of your favorite comedians. So guys like a Brian Regan or a Jim Gaffigan, they command a stage not just with their voices and their words, but with big movements and facial expressions that add dramatic effect to their jokes. So don't be afraid to turn everything up just a little bit bigger than you think you need to. Make your movements a little bit more pronounced, use bigger facial expressions. When you tell a story, maybe even act out part of the scene. You can even adopt a character's voice to add emphasis. All of these things will help to engage the audience and give them something to lean into. Remember, it might feel like it's a little too much for you up there on stage, but for those in the back row, it's going to make it so much easier to connect with what it is that you're doing than if you're just standing behind a podium like a statue. So you want to turn up the action and turn it up from a speech into a performance. Tip number 6 is to tell stories. Now, I mentioned storytelling in the last point, but really it deserves its own tip. See, there's a saying that you've probably heard before that people might forget what you say, but they will never forget how you made them feel. And it's a saying because it's true, and the best way to make people feel something is to use the power of stories. See, facts are great and can provide compelling evidence, but nothing leaves a mark on an audience like a great story. It could be something that happened to you, it could be a story of someone else. Just remember that people pay more attention when you are telling a story. You see, it's the best way to instantly connect with your audience. Now, what is a story? I mean, it's not really something that we need to define, but I love author Donald Miller's definition of it. He says that a story is a character who wants something and has to overcome conflict to get it. I mean, think of any great story that you have, and it almost always have those 3 elements. There's a person, a desire, and a conflict. And that's why stories are so powerful and relatable, because we all have desires. We all experience conflict in trying to reach those desires. Think of the last time that you were listening to a talk and you weren't really listening to it, but then the speaker said something like, it's funny, the other day I was at the mall and all of a sudden out of nowhere. Did you notice that your attention immediately escalated? Like, in fact, right now, you probably want me to finish that story. Like, what happened at the mall? What do you mean all of a sudden out of nowhere? That's the power of a story. They're the most effective tool that we have to communicate with each other as humans. So use that to your advantage and keep the audience leaning in for the next story. Tip number 7 is to rehearse, rehearse, rehearse. If you want to deliver a presentation that keeps people engaged, give a presentation that is well rehearsed. The more you know your content, the better you will be at delivering it. And the better you are at delivering it, the more engaged your audience will be. There's really no shortcut for this idea, and frankly, there shouldn't be. It's your job as the presenter to be extremely familiar and organized with the ideas that you're presenting. That's why you've been brought in to speak in the first place. In fact, the more you rehearse, the easier it is to do all the things that we've talked about in this video. So nailing that strong opening, creating interaction points, proper pacing, solid slides, engaging body language, great storytelling, all of those things will fall into place much easier when you are well rehearsed. In short, you become a better speaker with every at-bat, so the more you rehearse, the better you will become. So there you have it, 7 tips to becoming a more engaging speaker. If you found this video helpful, be sure and click like, let other people know about it. Make sure you subscribe to the channel so you don't miss out on the future videos with more tips and strategies on all about how you can become a better public speaker. Also, after you subscribe, I'd love to hear from you, so leave a comment below. Let me know your best tip for being an engaging speaker. I'm going to read all the comments. Can't wait to read yours.